Bitcoin created its own time. It sounds weird, but it was a necessity for it to work. In today's episode, we're going to talk about this and why is it so important. Thank you for joining me once again. This time, let's talk about why was it necessary for Bitcoin to have its own rhythm, its own clock. If you think about it, Bitcoin being a decentralized network, for it to work, it requires for it to have some consensus. It's the whole purpose and the whole complexity of having a decentralized network. In the case of Bitcoin, the way it reaches consensus is through this validation mechanism called proof of work. And it's the whole thing that miners are executing in terms of trying to solve these complex algorithms in order to get rewarded with new Bitcoin that didn't exist in the past. I'm going to create a episode for mining in particular, but what you need to know today is that in a decentralized network, particularly on Bitcoin, you want to make sure that you reach consensus, and you also want to make sure that you can reward the first miner that is able to find this answer to the puzzle that is being presented for the entire network. So if you have a decentralized network, then you don't want to have a time server. You don't want to have a few entities within that network defining what is the current time, because then what prevents the network from saying, well, actually, this guy was the one that was first. No, it actually was this other one. That's the whole thing that wouldn't work in a classical timestamp based network. So how do you solve this in a blockchain? How do you solve this in a decentralized network? Well, in the case of Bitcoin, it was solved by two factors. One is the difficulty adjustment, and the other one is basically the target that it has for every 2016 blocks for it to get recalibrated. So how this works is essentially every 2016 blocks that get certified in the network, which roughly will take 2 weeks. I will tell you why it is 2 weeks. Basically, the Bitcoin protocol self-calibrates and asks, okay, was the time span between now and the last difficulty adjustment 2 weeks, or was it less, or was it more than that? If the answer is it was less than 2 weeks, it means that the rhythm, the hash power, the mining capacity that the network has for creating new blocks, it is basically too high, it's running too hot, and it's making the network accelerate. So it is taking less. Let's make then the difficulty for all this capacity that the network has to increase, so that now the time that it'll take for these blocks to get certified will be more than it took. And roughly the network calibrates so that it's always 2 weeks, which roughly it means that it should always take 10 minutes for a new block to get certified. Now, why do I say roughly? Because again, there is no timestamp. There is no clock saying it is time now to reward a new block. The whole time is based on processing power from the miners, and all that hashing power, all that processing power being pursuing this difficult algorithm that is required to be hashed and resolved in order for them to get rewarded with new Bitcoin. So it sounds a little bit counterintuitive because there is no clock. The clock or the rhythm is determined by how complex it is to solve these math puzzles, and that complexity is driven by how many participants or how much hash power there is in the network. So I know that it sounds confusing, but there is no better way than to show you in a website that I like, which is called mempool.space. So let me switch my screen real quick here. You should be seeing the website. It's called mempool.space. And this is nothing but a visualizer of the Bitcoin blockchain. I'm not going to get into depth into any of these particular sections. The only thing that I want you to see is that In this page, you see all these transactions that are candidates to be certified in a new block. That certification in this case will happen in the next 9 minutes. And if you see, the last block that was certified is this one, block 907,595, and it took place 10 minutes ago. So again, roughly every 10 minutes, it's a new block that gets certified in the network. Now, let's pay attention to this section, which also validates what I have been just telling you, which is right now, it is taking roughly 9.8 minutes to certify a new block. And the reason why is because there is a certain difficulty, and out of that difficulty adjustment, out of the 2016, there have been already 385 that have been certified. There are 1,621 blocks remaining for the next difficulty adjustment, but that difficulty adjustment will happen regardless of the amount of transactions in the Bitcoin network, the amount of miners. It's something that by protocol, it's hard-coded, it's defined, and in 10 days, roughly, in August 8th at 8:45 a.m., there will be yet again a protocol assessment of how much complexity the miners need to have for each one of these blocks to be certified. And based on that capacity that the network has, how do we make sure that that capacity is calibrated for a certification of roughly every 10 minutes of a new block? So this is how Bitcoin keeps its rhythm. This is how it created its own time. And this is why it's yet another layer that people don't understand, and that just drives more resilience, more robustness, more safety to the whole protocol. The more miners there is in the network, it's not a faster issuance of Bitcoin. It's rather just an increase of difficulty adjustment that makes the network just hum in this 10-minute rhythm for certifying blocks, and it only makes it more resilient because it has more participants now involved in their security, in its stability, and in its pursuit for getting new Bitcoin that every time gets scarcer and scarcer. In any case, hope this has been valuable. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, bye.